Chapter 13. Home on the Range. "What's the big secret?" Pam asked her younger brother and sisters. Sue stood up very straight and announced, "Truchas is going to let Holly and Ricky and me go with him and give the babies back to their mothers." Pam laughed and asked what she meant by this. Holly explained that the three children were going to deliver the dogie and the baby lamb to the herds from which they had been lost. "But I thought we decided," Pete spoke up, "that the sheep were stolen and probably are on their way to Kansas City." Trucha said that it would not matter which herd the baby lamb was given to. She could take care of herself as long as she had some protection from the older animals. "How soon can we go?" Ricky wanted to know. "As soon as we get the truck gassed up and your mother says we can go." As Pam listened, a wistful look came into her face. This sounded like an exciting adventure, and she wished she might go along. Truchas must have read her thoughts, because he suddenly smiled at the girl and invited her to accompany them. "Oh, thank you," she cried. "I'll ask Mother." When Mrs. Hollister heard the plan, she consulted Mrs. Vega about it. "Oh, it's perfectly safe," the ranch woman replied. "Truchas will take good care of them." Since there was only one seat in the truck, Diego fitted a plank into the vehicle just behind the cab and spread an old carpet over it as a second seat. The baby animals were hobbled, then hoisted into the back and tied to the sides of the truck so they could not move. "All aboard," Truchas called out. The four Hollister children climbed aboard. Sue sat next to Truchas, with Ricky on the end. Pam and Holly took the rear seat. What a din there was as the truck started off. The dog Beans barked joyfully. But the lamb and the dogie made it known that they did not like the treatment they were getting. The calf bawled loudly, and the lamb gave a series of pitiful baas. Everybody laughed except Sue. She was very serious. Kneeling on the seat and looking back, she said, "Don't cry, we're not going to hurt you." After a long ride, they saw cattle grazing on a slope. Truchas drove directly to them and stopped. As the old man stepped out of the truck, he said, "Well, here's where we leave the dogie. Come on, you young cowboys, help me get him out of here." The children climbed to the rear of the truck and helped the herder untie the knots of the ropes which bound the calf. Then they lifted him to the ground. Like a shot, he loped toward the older animals, going from one to another and rubbing noses with them. "He's kissing them," Sue called out gleefully. "The dogie's certainly glad to be back," Holly remarked. "Truchas, are you sure they'll be nice to him?" The herder nodded. And with this assurance, the children got back into the truck and rode away. "Do we have far to go now?" Pam asked. "It's quite a way," Truchas answered. "Sometimes we keep cattle and sheep close together, because sheep aren't fighters, and the calves will drive off enemies. But at this time of year, the sheep like high ground." "Why?" Holly asked. Truchas lifted his sombrero, and his leathery face wrinkled as he grinned at the girl. "You'd do well in 4-H club," he said. And before Holly could ask a question about that, the old herder went on. "Sheep like higher ground because there's better pasture for them, more nice weeds to eat. Besides, sheep originally came from high countries, so they're right at home near the clouds." Sue giggled. "How much longer do we have to ride to get near the clouds, Truchas?" "About an hour," the herder replied. Then he chuckled. "You think you can stand it?" The children said stoutly that they could. But secretly, each one was thinking that he had never been so uncomfortable on a ride before. Pam and Holly particularly wished there were a back to their board seat, and that it had some cushions on it. "It won't be long now," Truchas announced finally. "If you children will keep your eyes open, you'll see the sheep over to the left on that hill." Presently, white dots became visible, and soon they were driving up to one of the herds, which the children had seen from the air. Truchas stopped at the foot of the hill, and they all climbed out. "What fine-looking lambs," Pam said, as her gaze drifted over the flock. "Glad you like 'em," Truchas said, his eyes squinting. "Best 2-year-olds on the range." Are they only two? Sue asked, wide-eyed. How can you tell? By their size and their teeth, came the reply. At this, all the Hollisters looked at the old herder with questioning looks. All right, Truchess chuckled, holding up his hands as if to ward off an outburst of queries. I'll tell you about their teeth. Are you a lammy dentist? Sue piped up. Shush, Pam said. No, he's not. Let Truchess tell his story. Sue held her hands behind her back and swayed from one foot to the other. The kind old man went on. A sheep has 8 front teeth, all in the lower jaw. These come up against a rubber-like pad in the upper jaw. Holly burst out, Don't they ever get teeth upstairs? Not in front, the herder replied, rubbing his hand over his chin. Now, about their age. A lamb gets its 8 front teeth by the time it's 3 weeks old. It may have 2 or 4 at birth. Sue put her fingers in her mouth. Pam, she said thickly, did I have any teeth when I was born? Pam laughed. No, honey. Truchess grinned too. And sheep get all their second teeth before you start losing your first ones, he said. They're all set when they're only 4 years old to eat the toughest kind of grass. At this moment, the lamb in the truck bleated. Sue looked at it tenderly and said, She's crying. When are we going to make our lammy a not orphan? Everybody grinned and turned toward the tied-up baby sheep. Right now, Truchess promised. Actually, she's smiling. The lamb knows she's near a herd, the man added, as Ricky untied the little animal and set her on the ground. Now you won't be an orphan anymore, Sue told her, giving the animal a goodbye hug. You'll have lots of mothers and fathers. Holly looked very sad as she too hugged the lamb. I'll probably never see you again, she said, but I'll always remember you. Take good care of yourself. The little animal paused a couple of seconds and suddenly rubbed her nose against those of Holly and Sue. The little girls giggled, then released the animal, who bounded forward to her sheep family. Goodbye, goodbye, all the children called, as they watched her prance up the hillside and disappear among the larger animals. Oh, this was such fun, Pam said, as they stepped into the truck and started for home. It sure was, said Ricky. Looking directly at Truchess, he added, I don't want to be a dude. I want to be a real cowboy or a sheep herder. Truchess smiled. Tell you what, son, he said. You try it for a while in Shoreham, and if you don't like it there, get your daddy to send you out here, and I'll take you under my wing. At this moment, Ricky was quite sure he would return to the Vegas ranch before very long. He became so lost in thought, the next thing he knew, the truck was within sight of the ranch buildings. Oh, look, Pam called out. There's Daddy driving the Jeep and towing the airplane with Mr. Vega inside. As soon as Truchess parked the truck, the children got out and ran over to the men. After telling about their adventure, Ricky said, Mr. Vega, how are we going to get your plane fixed? Oh, we can make the repairs right here, Mr. Vega answered. On a ranch, one has to learn to be a good mechanic. We have a well-equipped tool shop here in one end of the barn. Come, I'll show it to you. The two went off, while the others walked to the house. But in a few moments, Mr. Vega and Ricky joined them. The little boy's eyes were glowing, and he declared that the workshop had even more tools than the trading post. Then it has an awful lot, said Pete. At this moment, the telephone rang. Diego answered it. Your line has been repaired, a voice said, and there is a telegram for you from Kansas City. Will you please read it to me? Diego asked. The boy listened intently for a few moments, a perplexed look coming over his face. Then he said, Thank you, and hung up. Dad, he called to his father, who was just entering the room. Kansas City hasn't received any of our sheep lately. Then your animals may still be somewhere on the range, Pete reasoned. If the lost sheep are on Cottonwood Ranch, he added to Diego after Mr. Vega had gone out, we certainly ought to find them. Right, Diego agreed. I'll keep my eyes open while I'm riding fence tomorrow. Ricky Ricky, who had been listening intently, sidled up to him. "Will you take me along?" he requested. "Why, sure, if you can stand it." "Just what do you do?" the smaller boy asked. "Well, sometimes the fences that separate our property from neighbors break, and we have to mend them so that our cattle don't wander off." "Don't the steers ever jump over?" Ricky asked. Diego said this was rare. Cattle are pretty slow-thinking and content. As long as they have enough to eat and drink, they stay inside the fence. "But sheep are different," he added. "We can't fence them in, and they wander all around. We use dogs to help the herdsmen keep them together." At dusk that evening, Mrs. Hollister called the roll for her children to prepare for bed. When she did this at home in Shoreham, the children giggled and gave funny answers, like, "Ricky is sticky and can't go to bed." This evening, Holly chirped, "Pam is a woolly lamb and will be a dolly for Holly's bed." Suddenly Pete said, "Say, where's Sue? I haven't heard a peep out of that little cricket." "You're right," his mother said. "Did she wander off?" Pete cupped his hands and called, but there was no reply. Then all the children began to search through the house for Sue. Finally, Dolores chuckled. "Well, well, see what I found here." She pointed to a corner of the living room behind the piano. There was Sue, sitting cross-legged with a small purse mirror in her hands and looking into her mouth. "I want to see how many teeth I have," she said, finally closing her lips so she could speak properly. The others shook with giggles, and Sue emerged from her hiding place. "I guess I really am 4 years old," she announced soberly. "I only have my baby teeth." When the Hollisters settled down, all except Ricky went to sleep right away. He was so eager for the next day's trip that it took at least 5 minutes for him to slip in dreamland. He was up the next morning before anyone else, and stood outside Diego's room to be sure of not being left behind. "Hi," he said as the older boy came out. The two cooked their own breakfast and set off on ponies before anyone else was awake. Diego's work included visiting one of the sheep herds and carrying mail and messages to the shepherd in charge. The boy decided to go there first. After jogging along for an hour, the two young riders came to the top of a rocky knoll on which a large herd was scattered about. They dismounted, and Diego walked toward a hut where the shepherd stayed. "Hello, Jim," he called. Ricky had not followed Diego. He was busy watching a large dog who had started barking at a great big ram with curled back horns. The sheep turned and started to run. Suddenly, the angry ram saw Ricky directly in his path. Instead of swerving out of the way, he lowered his head and rushed at the little boy.